In this lesson, we'll take a quick look at the way that I finished pre-composing the rest of the layers to group them, and then we'll begin animating our first piece, which will be our phone border. Okay, so you can just kind of take a look at the way the interface is laid out now. It's pretty much the same, not a whole lot moved around, but now if I just drag this up, you see we have a lot fewer layers sitting here just because everything's been grouped a little bit better. And there were a few things I didn't group. One of them was this apps layer. You can see that's kind of here. Those are not going to be all individually controlled, so we're not going to be worrying about that. And then these two buttons on the folders right there, I've left individual, and we'll probably pre-compose those again with the rest of this folder later once we get a few more things animating. So sometimes that tends to happen, and I'm just allowing that to be free floating for now. So that'll get cut down a little bit more. And probably as we work, we might want to color code a few of these layers. So right now I'm just leaving them that default color, but we may think about later on kind of just trying to make this a little bit easier to see by changing up that sandstone default. Okay, so now that we've pretty much got that figured out, let's kind of focus here on that phone border. So if we go back out to our main comp, you can see that the phone border is sitting nicely there with the phone. It's still inside of there. I didn't have to do too much adjusting to move the phone back once we pre-composed that. Or the phone border rather. And what I would like to happen is whenever he sets this phone down on the desk, so just right here at the very beginning, I would like for the border to kind of flicker on and sort of draw around the edge of that phone there. Now there's a couple things that we need to keep in mind. We can't have that animation too fast or too slow because of the time factors that are involved with our actor. So if we had it too slow, once we get a little bit further here, his hand is going to come back into play, and we need to have that animation finished. On the other hand, once we get our phone laying there on the table, we don't want the animation to happen so quickly that his hand is still in the way. So you can kind of see he lays it down, and then if we had the animation pretty much finishing right away, it might not look great. So we need to go ahead and just kind of keep that in mind as we work, just striking that balance. So let's go ahead and find the exact frame where it makes sense for this phone to be laid on the table. So I'm just going to kind of back this up a little bit here. Just right about where the phone is being positioned. So now it looks like I'm at about frame 35, and I'm just going to hit the page down key to go frame by frame to kind of just slowly go through that animation and see how it moves as it's being set down. Okay, so we have the phone sitting just right about here. It looks like it comes to a complete stop on this frame right here, 45. So about 45, we can at least begin that animation. So let's go ahead and just set a marker here. So with my current time indicator on the 45th frame, I'm going to go ahead and hit the asterisk key on my number pad just to set a key or a marker here at the very top. I don't have any of my layers selected, so I'm not worrying about that not showing up. So we'll leave that right there, and then let's go ahead and go back inside of that interface. And it looks like if we come down here a little bit, our phone is at the very bottom of our stacking order. Now it depends on your personal preference for workflow, but because this doesn't overlap anything, the stacking order is really only going to be a helpful indicator to us as far as when things happen. So I kind of prefer to have things happening at the top first and then kind of drill down through. It doesn't really matter if the stacking order doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag that phone to the top, and that's going to just maybe help me stay a little more organized. And then I'm going to hit the open bracket key, so left bracket, and that's just going to scoot that layer over so that it actually starts on that 45th frame. So we really don't need any of our information, at least until this point here, because this is kind of what's going to be happening. The phone will turn on the machine or the system when it's laid on the table, and this is kind of almost like recognizing or initiating the fact that the phone's been laid down. So I have moved this forward to the current time indicator so that when I start setting keyframes inside of this comp, it will be really simple and I can just do it from the beginning, and I'm not starting a little bit into the composition. Now, we don't have to do that every time, but sometimes it really is helpful. So because this is our phone and it's kind of our main anchor, let's go ahead and change the tag of this phone. So I'm just going to click on that little colored tag right there, and let's just choose aqua. So this layer is going to be the color for our phone, and that's just going to help keep us a little more organized. So we'll go ahead and double click inside this comp. And then just right here at the beginning, we're ready to start animating. So I feel like personally it makes sense for this to begin in the upper left-hand corner, kind of similarly to the way that you would read. So this is the first piece that I want to have animating on. I'm going to go ahead and turn this to full resolution just because that quarter is kind of hard to look at for a long time, especially when we're zoomed in so close like this. So what I'm going to be using is a really helpful script inside of After Effects, and I use it in combination with turning these Illustrator layers to After Effects shape layers, and that's going to allow us to create the animation that we want and just really make it a little bit faster. But before I show you how to use the script, I'm going to show you how to do it the old-fashioned way, just so that you can appreciate how much faster it is to use the script. So if I come up here and just click that first phone corner, you can see that it's still the Illustrator layer, and I don't have anything really special besides my transform properties. But I can right-click that layer and come up here where it says create shapes from vector layer, and if I choose that, it's going to give me a layer that now has that path, just like you would see if you were still inside Illustrator. You would be able to see that path, or if we had drawn this path originally inside of After Effects. So now I don't even need this Illustrator layer anymore. In fact, After Effects turns off the eyeball of that layer for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that from my timeline, and I'll just stick with the layer that was placed there by After Effects for me. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to run the script. Now, the reason why I want to show you how to do it with a script is because notice that if I try to select multiple layers, right-click, and choose that same option, create shapes from vector layer, it doesn't allow me to do it. So the script simply does it for me with multiple layers selected. So I'm just going to select the rest of those layers because I want to change all of those into shapes. Then we'll come up here, go to File, Scripts, Run Script File, and I just have the script saved right there, and I'll go ahead and hit open. Now that script that you just saw was not a script that I am allowed to redistribute, but you can see how powerful it is because now we have all of the shape layers sitting right here on our timeline. Now it is a script that you can find yourself simply by doing a search. So if you just simply search for batch vector to shape on the internet, you'll be able to find it right away. It's going to be the first thing that you see. So that's what it looks like. That's what you need to search for, and you'll be able to find it. And then you can download that and use it in all your own projects where you need to convert that. So now I'm just going to come through here and select and delete all those extra Illustrator layers and just stick with the outline layers that you see there shape layer that we have now instead. So I'm going to start up here in the upper left hand corner and animate using a really special preset that you can use whenever you're working with a shape layer. So I'm going to go ahead and just twirl this down, and you can see that right here we have this little add with a flyout menu, and if I choose that, I've got a few different options for what I can create. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up here just so that you can see all of those. Now, if I come down here, we've got this one right there called Trim Paths, and that's what we're going to be using. So you can go ahead and just choose that. And now there's really no difference because we haven't added any keyframes. So we have to come in here and start playing around with some of these values. So what basically happens is when you have this path, we can animate along the path without using a mask if we have this saved as a path and not as a fill. So we have a stroke, not a fill, and that's why we're able to use this. So you can see that if I scrub this backwards here, now I can see that moving along that edge. So what I want to happen is starting at that lower left hand corner, just kind of have nothing visible right here at the first key. So we can just go ahead and set that end keyframe right there. And then we're going to scrub forward a little bit and move that up to 100. So this can kind of just quickly pop on there, just kind of animate on, and then let's have this line just kind of continue the rest of the way around. So let's see how long we really need for this to happen. If we're working at 29.97 frames per second, we can just round that up to 30 for the purposes of counting keyframes. And really, a lot of animations that are going to be fast, when you're working with maybe motion graphics that have like a lot of text on screen, you don't want those to be really any less than half of your frame rate. So that would be 15 frames per second. But this animation can be faster than that simply because it's so few pixels moving in the grand scheme of how this looks. But I still don't really want to go maybe beneath 7 ever. So let's just try maybe something like 10 for now. And then if we need to make it faster, we can. So a really easy way to go forward 10 frames in time is simply to hold Shift and hit the page down key. And you can see that's about 10 frames right there. So I'm going to just drag that key backwards so that this animation happens over only 10 frames. So now you can see that that was pretty easy to create, and I just want to go through quickly now and do this to the rest of my layers. So if I wanted these to kind of pop up, like once this one finishes, then this one begins, then this one begins, then this one begins, I could just kind of pull my current time indicator to that last key. But I'm fearful that because we have 8 pieces here, that's going to take 80 frames, which is going to be about that's close to 3 seconds. So that might actually end up being too long. So instead of having them happen one after the other, I'm going to give it a little bit of an overlap. So I'm just going to go about 5 frames in, which will be halfway, and then we'll start that next piece. So let's go ahead now and we'll move down to this stroke. Toggle that down, go to the add, and let's choose Trim Paths again. And we know that this is going to be the beginning, so I can just bring this backwards to 0. We'll go ahead and set that end keyframe. Then we'll move forward 10 frames by holding Shift and hitting page down, and then crank that back up to 100. So now it kind of looks like that. Now let's start 5 frames into this animation. So you can either drag that or hit page down 5 times. And then let's go ahead and start this next corner. So we'll scroll back up here and we'll come over here to add, choose Trim Paths, toggle this down and drag that backwards. Go ahead and set our timer, hold, or our stopwatch, hold Shift, hit page down, crank that up to 100. And then we'll move backwards 5 frames so we can start our next piece. Select that one. We can toggle that down, go to add, choose Trim Paths, and go ahead and set that end there, bring that one back, move forward 10 frames, and crank it forward. So we're getting pretty fast at this. And now let's try this next piece here. We'll just select that one, toggle that down, go to Add, choose Trim Paths, toggle that down, pull this backwards, go forward 10 frames by hitting Shift Page down, then move forward. So now our animation kind of looks like this. Pretty interesting. Now what I'm going to do, since you probably have kind of gotten the hang of this, is I'm going to pause this really quickly and finish up the animation just so you can see what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, so I finished up keyframing the rest of that animation for you, and I'm just going to kind of scrub forward here to where that last bit is, just going to be this final layer there at the bottom, and let's just do a RAM preview to watch this through. So I'm just going to hit the 0 key on my number pad, and we'll just kind of watch that loop. And that looks pretty nice. The timing isn't taking too terribly long, so let's go ahead and go back out to our main composition and see how it looks here. So I'm just going to kind of back this up, and then we'll kind of move forward here just to where the phone is just about finished revealing. So we know that this marker right here is where that first animation is going to begin, and we'll just kind of go forward a little bit more, just to right about there. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the N key just to bring in that end point of the work area, and then the B key right there at the marker, and we'll do a quick RAM preview just to watch this, make sure it's not too fast or too slow in comparison to how quickly the actor's hand moves. So it's a good idea just to kind of watch that through, make sure it still looks good. And I'm going to just zoom out a little bit there so we can better just see it a little bit easier. And it looks like that's pretty good. Even if I backed this up maybe a little bit more, we could watch those frames just before there and kind of see what that looks like. Make sure it doesn't happen too quickly. So it's pretty instantaneous, but simply because it happens over so much time, I'm really happy with the way that that looks. And that's going to kind of be the benchmark for everything else. Anything we have that has those straight lines is, I think, going to look really nice if it's animated in similarly to this first piece, just kind of where we're starting there. And then later on we can come back in and animate some of these other pieces kind of coming out of that phone. But we're going to do that much later because I want to focus first on getting the rest of the pieces that he will interact with animated, and then that's going to maybe affect the placement of the items in the interface simply because of where the pushes and the buttons are happening. So in this lesson, we worked on animating the border of the phone by using trim paths and learned how to make a really simple animation simply by using a script and a preset and just a few keyframes.